All right. Hello, everyone. 안녕하세요. I wish I were in Korea, but I have to greet you from a sunny but still snowy morning in Warsaw. Let me know if there are any technical glitches, because I've just set up the hardware, so you never know. All right, so let's wait for Doris to get the audio connection, and then we're good to go. So over the next 70 to 80 minutes or so, I will first show a bit of the rationale behind using corpus linguistics in language teaching. Then I will showcase some general or universal tools and affordances of Corpora and corpus analysis software, illustrated with some examples. And finally, in the last part, I will show how two special genres of the English language can be investigated and what corpus analysis can reveal within those genres that will typically not be included in textbooks and other materials. So ideas that he proposed, mainly the idea that
we seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties on Michael's side. Hopefully we'll see him return pretty soon. I'm your host for this one, but I'm mostly here just to have the Zoom room open. So give it just a few minutes and hopefully Michael will be able to rejoin us quickly. Hang tight, give it a couple of minutes. Okay, you back? Unmute yourself. You're muted right now.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry about that.
No.
So I'm using mobile data. I have no other connection here. And since yesterday, it's been a bit patchy. So I think what I'm going to do is switch off my camera. That sometimes helps. I hope we are not into any more such unpleasant surprises. And that we can go back to where I was kicked off. All right, so I hope I've managed to briefly mention how Chomsky was responsible for many of our ideas that language is governed by a context-free grammar. And then the moment I got kicked off was when I was trying to present two quotes that were quite influential. And the quotes are: the new utterances that are produced and interpreted in the daily use of language are similar to those that constitute the past experience of the speaker and hearer, only in that they are determined by the same system of abstract underlying rules. And then Chomsky would go: repetition of fixed phrases is a rarity, and the main property of linguistic behavior is that it is innovative, and hence generative grammar, because the idea was that we generate sentences from scratch every moment. Now, not soon after, however, people began to question that tenet. And here, in the case of first language speakers, Polly and Sider, in an influential paper, wrote that native speakers do not exercise the creative potential of syntactic rules to anything like therefore extend. If they did so, they wouldn't be accepted as exhibiting native-like control of the language. And only a small proportion of the total set of grammatical sentences are native-like in form, in the sense of being readily acceptable to native informants as ordinary natural forms of expression. So the idea behind this alternative viewpoint was that patterning, idioms, and reuse of lexical material are much more of our linguistic behavior than generativists, for instance, would have us think. And here's one example. If you're proposing to someone, you will probably be using the phrase at the top of the slide, or maybe the second one, despite the fact that there are various other ways which could express the same idea. But those other ways would not be treated as natural. They would be weird at the least, sometimes perhaps creepy. So how can corpus tools help us? Here are a few that can be accessed. Wordsmith requires a license. Antconc is freeware. I will be referring to both in the subsequent slides. Wordsmith offers a little more functionality, but for all the basic purposes, Antconc is good as well. Then Mark Davis's Corpora are basically hosted online and also do not require a subscription. And a Sketch Engine does require subscription. WebCorp is also free. So here in the next slides, I will be basing partly on my own work and partly on materials by Chris Tribble, especially when I'm referencing Wordsmith tools. So what can we do with corpus analysis tools? Well, the easiest thing that we can go for is the frequency of words that appear in the corpora. So what words there are in the corpus and their occurrences. Now, I've downloaded a corpus of texts dealing with the COVID pandemic. What words do you think, that's a question to the audience now, what words do you think will be the most frequent in such a corpus? If you were to think of the words that will appear in the top 10 or top 20 most frequent words in the corpus, what will those words be in English?
Michael, are you sharing a screen?
I am, yes.
Okay, well, I don't see it on my screen. Can you check that?
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Just want to make sure it's smooth. There we go.
So what we missed was this slide with references to software and freeware that you can access and play around with also when you're building your own corpora. So the first two tools at the top are software solutions, and the remaining three are online interfaces. Okay, so the question that I will be posing is, we've got a corpus of text dealing with the COVID pandemic. What words do you think will be the most frequent in that corpus? If you think of the top 20 most frequent words, and the corpus is in the English language. Okay, toilet paper, mask, isolation. Yeah, they're pretty good, but they are nowhere near the top 20. And let's see what those words are. There they go. The two, P stands for a paragraph break. So that's an artifact. So the, to, of, and, in, for, that, is, on, as the Saxon genitive or the third person singular, with are, it, be. And then you really have to go down past the 50 most frequent words to come across the first content words of the language. And this is very typical of any text in any language that has functional categories. Now, the functional categories are going to occupy the top of the list, and it's only later that you're going to start getting content words, and then they will typically first be the most frequent verbs, like the copula be in different forms, pronouns, and then finally sometime down the line you're going to get the content words. So of course, if you're after content words, then I will show what you can do to get at those more quickly. So yeah, what we can find is the words that we've got in the corpus and their relative frequency, and then we can sort the words, for instance, alphabetically, but it's typically more useful to see the relative frequencies first. And of course, different genres and different corpora are going to give us different frequencies. So here on the left-hand side, you again have the most frequent words in the British National Corpus. So again, the function words, articles, prepositions, a pronoun, complementizer, the verb to be. But then if you look at different genres, the distribution of the words is different. So in terms of news, an indefinite article is pretty frequent because, well, you're introducing new information. In the academic corpus, in as a preposition is pretty frequent because you're discussing studies, literature. In speech, spoken samples, you've got the complementers that, you've got I and you, because you're referring to your interlocutor and to yourself, and to the content of someone else's words. And then in fiction, you have more of the third person as the protagonists. So this shows us that it matters what corpus we look at. Now, keywords, if we get past the function words, can tell us quite a lot about the content of a work. So here we've got two well-known pieces of literature in the English language. What works are they? Looking at the key terms that occur in those two texts. Let's see, Alice in Wonderland, right? That's the one on the left, and Heart of Darkness. Very good, great. So you can quickly see how knowing the content gives you the answer. Now, so these are keywords. So keywords go past the function words and extract those words that do not appear so frequently in what we would call a reference corpus. And these are typically proper names. These can refer to the theme or the topic of the text. And occasionally they can tell you something about the style or the genre. For instance, if you've got legal texts, then there are a lot of indices of such texts that we will look at later. And of course, as we said, different corpora can give you different frequencies. So here I'm comparing the corpus of contemporary American English. And on the left, you can see the keywords from the academic part, and on the right hand from fiction. And these were compared against a reference corpus that was taken from the news. So I treated that as my reference. Of course, your choice could be different. The main idea here is to illustrate that the different corpora are going to give you different keywords. And again, these are sorted by the frequency. So on the left-hand side in the academic text, we find a lot of the preposition of, we have students, we have et, probably from et al, the reference citation, study, research, teachers, learning, education, development, analysis, knowledge, and so on. Quite expected words if you think of academic content. And then on the right-hand side, we've got fiction. So we've got third person and first person and second person personal pronouns. And then you find I's, for instance, pretty high up, probably due to the descriptions of the protagonists. And then if you're interacting with someone, then you often look them in the eye. You have looked, you have door, and others, of course. You change your fiction corpus, you're going to get a slightly different list. Corpora started off with core contents lines. So these are basically lines of text that are spread around a word that we're interested in. Here again, I took an instance from the COVID corpus, and you can sort it according to the word that occurs to the right or to the left. Here it's right sorted, so you can see that it's just a snapshot of the corpus, but you can see that you can say virus emerged, virus epicenter, virus era, and so on and so forth. And you can, of course, scroll up and down and look at the relative frequencies of all those collocations. Collocations and core contents are not really a very recent or new addition. They started out in the 13th century with the Bible, and several studies afterwards would try and analyze all texts and all sentences that would mention a certain word. Later on, they would be applied, for instance, to Shakespeare's works. In those days, of course, you didn't have computers, so you had to do this all manually by hand. But, monasteries had the resources to pay monks to do that. Today, we can do it. It's all at our fingertips and within seconds. So we can, for instance, look at words that co-occur with certain words. Let's say we are interested in the adjective considerable, and we want to find out what words it typically goes together with. So here from Wordsmith tools, we can see that considerable can go together with amount, considerable number, considerable difference, considerable time, considerable variation, and so on and so forth. So when we're preparing some materials for our students, we can go for those instead of merely our intuitions, or we can let students investigate words for themselves. This is the same adjective, but from a different corpus, the corpus of contemporary American English. And here we can see that, again, the words that co-occur with the adjective considerable tend to be more or less the same. We have amount, number, not the same frequencies, but comparable ones. Here we can see that attention is higher up and effort is higher up than previously. The same question from yet another corpus interface, and again, amount is at the top, but then we can also see controversy or influence. The patterns are sort of similar, but there will be some slight differences at the very top. And then we can also do the same in a visual format with the word cloud, where the size of the word is going to indicate the relative frequency. And this may, for many learners and teachers as well, be a more digestible way of presenting information, because you can fit a lot more on the screen, and you can discern some words much more quickly. Apart from that, you can also look at not just what word is most often modified by another word. Here in the case of considerable, we took a modifier and then we looked at the head that is modified by that word, but we can look at any co-occurrences with their adjacent. or whether they're slightly less adjacent. So it doesn't have to be a collocation. It may be the case that we're looking at a word and we want to find what other words occur together with that word in a surrounding text. So for instance, here we have examples such as Down syndrome or warm-blooded that are collocations, but some others, for instance, incest and taboo, that's not a collocation, but they often co-occur together in the same text. Another way of visualizing information is looking at a plot that shows us where in the text a given key term appears. And here we have 5 texts from the COVID corpus, and we can see the relative distribution of the term virus in those texts. And we can see that, for instance, text 1 doesn't really have as many occurrences or relative occurrences of the term as the other text. And we can see that there's a pretty long stretch of the text where virus is not mentioned even once. Whereas, for instance, in text 3, you can see it recurring over and over and over and over again. And then, as we said, we typically may want to look at the most frequent co-occurrences, for instance, the word that occurs most frequently to the right. And here's a screen with that information. So the word in the right-hand column is the word that most frequently occurs after the word virus in our corpus. Now, today we typically want to go beyond single words. We have departed long ago from teaching isolated items. We typically present words in context, and we also present longer stretches, such as formulaic utterances. So Corpora can also give us not just the most frequent words, but the most frequent engrams. So bigrams, trigrams, and other occurrences that are longer than just one word. And again, you can solve them. And here we can see the most frequent 4 grams from the British National Corpus of Academic Texts. And we can see that some of them could be quite useful if we're teaching academic English. So we have expressions such as, on the other hand, in terms of, in the case of, on the basis of, as a result of, the extent to which it is important to, and so on. Some of them, of course, will not really be very useful, so it's good to go through and filter them before we eventually present the materials to our students. But of course, students can play around with this on their own as well. Here we look at, for instance, the most frequent words that appear after a number of, and here we only find one in the small corpus. The other ones, if you look at the frequencies, they have 0 occurrences, so they don't really count. If we had a larger corpus, then of course we'd come up with a few more words that would be useful. If we know how to tag corpora, then many interfaces enable use of part-of-speech tagging in order to look at only words that belong to a certain grammatical category. For instance, you may be interested in presenting materials that present the word question, but only used as a verb and not as a noun. Or you may be interested to look at the use of the word man, again, as a verb and not as a noun. And here we can see how that patterns out with examples in the bottom part of the screen. He claimed the charges covered such costs as staff to man the switchboard, or would be more than willing to man a City of London style disruption, or have recently been released from military service to man understaffed factories. And again, some of those will be more useful, some of them will be less pedagogically useful, but they present a context that may be hard to find even if we have an up-to-date dictionary. So corpora have been applied not just in language studies, but also in cultural studies because of the implicit assumption that lexical patterns can reveal patterns of thought and cultural connotations of common words. So Stubbs, for instance, who wrote prominently on the topic, argues that culture is not just encoded in words, but also in combinations of very common words. And he carried out an analysis of children's books. And in his corpus, he found that boys are often described as sad, kind, and brave, whereas girls are often described as young and pretty. Fathers often paint, drive cars, light fires, mothers bake cakes and pick flowers. And then in his corpus, again, Stubbs found that there are verbs that collocate exclusively with boys, but not that collocate exclusively with girls. And he gives one example from another grammatical category where he goes on to explain why girls are usually described as little and boys are usually described as small, even though you could think that, well, these are synonyms, right? So why is it that people say little girl and small boy much more often than small girl and little boy? And Stubbs offers one interpretation, saying if frequent associations are made between words, then this repetition makes some features of the word conceptually salient. And the essential argument about little is that it connotes cuteness, and its frequent collocation with girl conveys a sexist imbalance in such books. Such ideas, girls are smaller and cuter than boys, are acquired implicitly along with the recurrent collocation. So that's, of course, Stubbs's interpretation, and we might not necessarily agree with it, but it's certainly something that we can investigate with corpus tools and present, for instance, for discussion in the classroom. Now, another cultural phenomenon that we can compare is going shopping and going to church. And which of these do you think is talked about more often? Do people say go shopping more often, or do people say go to church more often? Let's see the chat again. Shopping, that's what you think. But actually, going to church is a little more frequent, at least in the previous iteration of Google Fight. Now they've changed the algorithm, so if you go to Google Fight today, you'll find going shopping being more often used, but in the past it was going to church, because they've tweaked the algorithm. Now we could now start thinking, why might that be the case? And then, of course, you could come up with different interpretations, but one possibility could be that going shopping is perhaps such a mundane and boring activity that it's not worth writing home about, whereas going to church is more of a festive event, more of a social activity, and it may therefore be less frequent, but more likely to report. Just like you're probably not necessarily always going to be saying what you had for breakfast, unless you're an Instagrammer. And again, this may be an interpretation that need not be the right one, but it's something that may stimulate discussion in the classroom. So Corpora, I have changed the language teaching landscape a lot because they challenge this Chomskyan slot and filler view of language, and they recognize the importance of chunks and lexical patterns in the form of collocations, colligations, and semantic prosodies. Collocations, well, words appearing together in company. So we can say that prices fall and rise, decrease, increase, but we can't use seeming synonyms such as ascend, descend, collapse. And prices can be attractive and modest, but they can't be pretty, meek, or humble, even though pretty could be seen as a synonym of attractive, and meek and humble could be seen as synonyms of modest. So what happens with collocations is also that typically at least one of the words that appears in a collocation has a limited range of the other words that it can go with. For instance, if you're thinking of the activities that you can have with lunch, you can have lunch, you can eat lunch, maybe a few other verbs, but not really too many. If you think of the adjective rancid, then it will typically go with fats that you can eat. Decision, you can make a decision, you can take a decision, you can arrive at a decision, again, not too many. Mood, almost always, not 100% of the time, but over 90% of the time appears in the construction mood point, just as vested most of the time appears in the construction vested interest. And in terms of language development, over time, collocations often turn into fixed expressions and sometimes into single words. So you can say in spite of, but you can also say despite, which didn't use to be a single word in the past. Corpora can also help us solve dilemmas about collocation. So you might be thinking, or your students might be thinking, do you say Amazon jungle or do you say Amazonian jungle? So you can go to Google and you can compare the frequencies and you find, all right, Amazon jungle is 8 or more 8 times more frequent than Amazonian jungle. So probably I'm safer off going for this form than the other one. Here, I'd like to make a short aside that sometimes teachers fall into the trap of thinking, all right, I've presented a collocation and that's it. It's perfect. My lesson is perfect now. So a collocation can be such as that where clench and teeth go together. Usually it's not enough. Usually you have to present the right form of the collocation in the right context, because otherwise your learners may come up with sentences such as, my mom is always clenching her teeth, or I was watching a film when I clenched my teeth, or if I hadn't clenched my teeth, I wouldn't have bitten my tongue. Here, learners seem to be using a collocation, but it's not really, right? Because the form and the meaning is that when you have a person speaking through, or sometimes between, but through is more frequent, clenched teeth. Collocations refer to the co-occurrence of a word with a grammatical construction. For instance, the verb to kid is practically only used in the progressive. So you can say, you must be kidding me, but you won't say, she kids me every day, or I was kidded yesterday. That would be weird. Constructions such as look forward to, followed by a nominal construction that can also be treated as a collocation, or verb patterns, subcategorization frames, prepositions that go with certain forms. These are all parts of collocations. And then semantic prosodies, that's the idea that you have a sort of a spillover of meaning from one word to the ones that it goes with. So for instance, the verb commit typically goes with activities that are either criminal or at least frowned upon. Commit crime, commit murder, commit suicide. So in language teaching, what Corpora and the advent of corpus tools changed was that the shift of emphasis happened from what was possible and impossible from a grammatical structural perspective to what is probable and improbable in a target language, typically native speaker discourse. Let me give you an example from a study that was carried out by colleagues of mine. This comes from a picture description task where different participants, native and non-native speakers of English, saw a sequence of pictures and had to retell the story behind them. And here's one example. It went like this. When we were driving on a holiday with our car, we had many adventures. First, we got a flat tire. We lifted the car with a special tool and exchanged the wheel, but after a few kilometers, all of a sudden the car stopped. We were trying to wave at someone, but nobody wanted to stop. Then we realized we simply lacked petrol. We had to go to the petrol station on our feet. If you analyze this from a syntactic point of view, there's nothing wrong there. All the words or all the categories, grammatical categories that you expect are there. The patterns are fine. Everything's fine from a syntactic and morphological perspective. However, when you look at it from what a native speaker would say, all the items in red, those where you would say things differently, right? We put the car on a jack, we changed the wheel, all of a sudden we were trying to flag someone down, we ran out of petrol, we had to walk to the petrol station. So this is the difference between a text that is grammatical and a text that is natural sounding or idiomatic for native speakers. Of course, if we're teaching English for the purpose of lingua franca communication, we typically will not bother with this issue. So Corpora, or the advent of Corpora, changed the content of language teaching, but also the form and format of classroom instruction, in that it brought into the classroom a lot more of concordancing that would be done by the teacher and the students, and data-driven learning where the students would be able to apply the tools in their own learning and analysis of language. Of course, we always need to consider the needs, goals, and profiles of our learners to think whether the introduction of data-driven learning is going to be suitable in our context. So collocations have become very fashionable in English language teaching over the last few decades. They are taken to be the gist of native likeness. And if you go for collocations, then you have a much richer repertoire of things that you can teach than merely grammar instruction. But of course, the question remains whether the goal of instruction is for your students to try and approach a native speaker model, which is questionable, and I'll be talking about that next week, or English for international intelligibility, where idiomaticity may actually be detrimental. And we need to think whether our learners will necessarily benefit from Corpora's instruction, from the introduction of Corpora, and the question of being able to tell which of the collocations that we've identified are actually going to be useful to our learners. Now, let me show how that goes, or what I mean by that. Here's an extract from an authentic textbook. And the example there was, the doctor loves the patient, a nurse hates a doctor, my patient adores my nurse. So here, of course, this comes from a chapter that tries to illustrate a certain grammatical construction. There are a few problems with that already. One is that, well, this is a bit stilted. The other is that the learners might mistakenly assume that if a word appears before the noun, the first noun, the same word must appear before the second noun. So if it's the in the first noun phrase, it must be the in the second noun phrase. If it's a possessive in the first noun phrase, it must be the same possessive in the second noun phrase, right? So there's already another problem here. Let's take an example from a different textbook. I am John Brown. I am Mary Brown. I have a book. This is my book. I have a pen. This is my pen. Have we a house? Yes, we have a house. We are in our house. Have we a sitting room? Yes, we have a sitting room. This is our sitting room. We are in our sitting room. Right, like a conversation that takes place every day in families around the world. So perhaps let's try and look at an example from a corpus, an authentic example that of a conversation that took place at a post office. Can I have a second class stamp, please, Les? Yeah, you can. There we are. Thank you. And 1 penny. That's for me to spend, is it? That's right. I bought I bought a new book of 10 first class when I was in town today, and I've left them at home in my shopping bag. Have you? And I've got only one left. Oh dear. Bye. Bye. Now, this is authentic communication. And there's one phrase there that could be helpful. Can I have a second class stamp, please? You could take that out and you could use it in your materials, but probably you wouldn't want to use everything here. You could have doubts at using this substandard in me shopping bag. And then there's the expression, there we are. There's the alternative, here you are. Sometimes you might argue that here you are might be treated as a little more polite. So you might go for that one instead. So of course, when you take input from Corpora, you typically still want to rework it before presenting that to the students. So this in turn shows that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater and go for the other extreme, that is throw away all course books and go to Corpora, because language samples that occur in real life among native speakers are not necessarily good examples to learn from. All right, let's look at some other authentic materials, and this illustrates a certain tendency in legal texts in English. And that's for doublets and triplets, where typically you will have constructions where a given grammatical category is conjoined with a conjunction to form a pair or a triad. And if you go for, let's say, the third sentence, you see that half the text is composed of such doublets and triplets. I grant to my attorney, in fact, therefore, power and authority to do and perform all and every act and thing required and proper to be done in the exercise of any of the rights and powers granted herein as fully as I might do. Half the text is composed of this construction. And this means that if you want to translate a legal text from one language into English, then you might actually want to increase the length of the English text to include such constructions to make it sound like the English civil code, for instance. Now, this has been a lot of text, so let me, for a moment, show a few graphical interfaces that allow us to present corpus information in a visual format, again, in a language or culture classroom. And after that, I'll move to showcasing a few examples of genre-specific language that can be revealed with Corpora. So one kind of visualization that shows the same information as concordancing lines is a word tree, where instead of lines of text, you've got this tree where the size of the font again illustrates how often a certain co-occurrence of words happens. Another format of visualizing information is a word cloud. Probably many of you here are familiar with that. Here, what I took is the Nobel Prize acceptance speech by Olga Tokarczuk. And I fed it into one of the many existing interfaces, and you can see that the words that appear in larger font are the words that are more frequent. So you can quickly glean an insight into the content of the speech. So you can see that Tokarczuk talks about the world and story and living experiences, humans, and many other words that get visually smaller and smaller. And of course, you can take many other texts and present them in such a manner. One interface that I like personally is Google Engrams, where we can compare, for instance, the frequencies of synonyms or words that appear to be synonyms. So let's here look over time at the frequencies of 4 words: a guy, fellow, bloke, chap. You can see that historically, fellow was the most frequent word, and then chap was as frequent and at times more frequent, at least if you look at books. And then chap started going down, and in the 90s, guys started to become more and more popular. So probably in a few decades, a guy is going to become more frequent than fellow. We can also use another software solution from Google, this time Google Trends, to look at how often certain words or expressions were referenced either online, by materials online, for instance, blogs, news, and other outlets, or how often people searched for those terms. So here I chose a neologism, octomom, so a mother of octuplets. And you can see how it came to be in around 2009. And then people lost a bit of interest. And then when there was another mom of octuplets, then it spiked again, and then, trailed off. And you can, of course, use it to follow many other trends, especially the ones that are pretty current. You can also use that to play with different concepts. Here I took turkey, and of course turkey can stand for the bird, and it can stand for the country. So you can see that at least in English writing, the word co-occurs much more with the American culture and Canadian culture interpretations than with the interpretations of what happens in Ankara. Yet a different visualization of relationships in a text are in the form of a network. And this time I took Martin Luther King's famous speech. And you can see how the different words are not just more and less frequent, but also how they connect to one another. And finally, you can play and see the co-occurrences of different words and synonyms, and whether they are indeed synonyms in the way they behave. So here you can see that in a small corpus like this, affluent and well-off co-occur with people, but then you can say affluent business or affluent nation or affluent country, but not so much well-off nation or well-off country. And you can compare that across native and non-native speaker data as well. Finally, for some cultural information, you can compare words that refer to the same concepts, but maybe used differently in different parts. So here's the competition between pop, Coke, and soda to refer to fizzy drinks in the United States. And you can see that there is no one universal standard American word for fizzy drinks, because it depends where you go. All right, so in the last part of the presentation, I will present 2 genres specialized genres, and what corpus insights can reveal that sometimes dictionaries cannot, and a few other specificities of those genres. Let me just have a sip of water. All right. So let's start with legal English, and then we'll finish off on a much lighter note. So legal English is characterized by some connectors and discourse markers that you won't typically find in everyday speech. Some of them you will. Notwithstanding, occasionally you can come across that, provided, but let's say pursuant to, you won't really hear that very often, or herein before, hereunder, herein above, very typical of English, but not really other texts. Adverbs are typically infrequent in legal English because the characteristic of legal English is that the text should not be open to subjective interpretation. But there are a few adverbs that do occur, and these typically appear in collocations. Then sometimes you will find that legal English uses different forms of verbs than every day. So instead of struck, you will typically say stricken. And proven appears much or more often than proved, even in American English. Collocations are just a few here that typically every sworn translator needs to know in order to pass their examination. Of course, there are a lot more. These are just to give a flavor. Pronouns are pretty infrequent, and if they do occur, it's not the pronouns that we typically think of. It's usually the word same and not he, she, it, they. First and second person pronouns are quite expectedly rare. And instead of nobody or no one, you will typically say no person. A higher occurrence of non-personal which. Of course, we know very well that which can appear with human antecedents, and sometimes you cannot say who. And that's in all those situations where you're not referring to a person's identity, but function or role or position. And of course, because that's the context that legal texts typically deal with, that's the context that you're going to expect in them, and that's the form that you're going to use. The formation of noun phrases also very frequently forms the form which plus head noun, rather than, for instance, the evaluation which, or a fine which, or a notice which. That's not so common of legal texts. And instead of the indefinite article, you're more likely to use the original form or the source of the original article, that is the numeral 1. Phrasal verbs are infrequent, except for just a few. But when they do occur, they do really occur. Nouns are often coordinated in singular and plural, so that's one of the kinds of doublets that we've seen before. In terms of word order, you again find the slightly rarer occurrence in legal texts of the terms defined rather than of the defined terms, the property attached rather than the attached property, the Dutch presiding, and so on and so forth. Emphatic do appears a lot more than you would expect, especially in statements taken by witnesses, defendants, and accusers. Subjunctive, much more frequent, even in conditional clauses, and a much higher occurrence than usual in of will and shall, especially shall, in conditional clauses than we are used to in general English. Modal verbs, here you can see a nice comparison of how modal verbs in literary texts and in legal texts are used with completely different frequencies. So you can see that legal texts use may and shall quite a lot, but not really can, could, will, and would, which in turn are used quite a lot in literature. Causatives, a construction that is quite rare outside of the legal context, is where you say that either a person has done something themselves or that they have caused something to be done. This also includes, so this causation also includes a pattern that we are, again, not typically used to. A pattern where the verb is split from its direct object and you've got an intervening element in the form of a passive infinitive. And of course, the infinitive is split also much more often than today. So that was legal English, pretty dense. We might be quite tired at this point. So for dessert, I decided to present the specificities of recipes, cookbooks, menus that are written in English and how they differ from everyday English. Now, one problem that we may have with English is, and I'll have to stop sharing to share again with sound, because I've got a short video. I actually have two videos. So that's it again. To illustrate one of the first problems you may come across when translating menus and recipes. And that's a clip that should be familiar to most of you.
You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the fuck a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
What do they call a Big Mac?
Big Mac's a Big Mac, but they call it Le Big Mac.
Le Big Mac. What do they call a Whopper?
I don't know. I didn't go on a Burger King.
Right, so here we've got a transcript of that conversation, and it illustrates, of course, that the measures that you come across may be problematic. But let's go beyond that. Here are a handful of mistranslations of items on menus from different languages. A few come from Chinese. There are some from Poland. There are some from Russia. I haven't got any from Korea because I have the collection of my photos from my different visits on a different computer. But you probably can recall some from your own experience. So why are menus, recipes problematic and difficult to translate? Because when you translate a language for special purposes, then you need to be familiar with jargon, the syntax that may differ from everyday syntax, as we've seen in the case of legal English, discourse conventions that may be different as well, modes of expression, as well as encyclopedic knowledge and experience. So what I will be illustrating here comes from an analysis of a corpus that I compiled from a collection of recipes that originally formed part of a software solution. And I use that software as my reference point because I was tasked with editing, proofreading, and translating a series of cookbooks for a well-known US hotel chain, where the chefs came from different language backgrounds. And the final product had to look as if written by native-speaking American chefs. So it had to look like an American cookbook. So this was a software that was developed in the US. It was edited, and the files were in TXT format, so they could easily be analyzed with a software solution. So I had 17 cookbooks. Here are some numbers that I could use in my database. So let me show first a few problems that often occur in a translation. And I was teaching this in China right before the pandemic, actually. I was in Beijing in November 2019. And I've decided to keep the Chinese characters because if anyone is familiar with Hanja, then they may be helpful. And I was actually also teaching that at some Korean universities where most of the classroom would actually be Chinese students more often than Korean students. Some problematic items, by no means an exclusive list, when you translate items on menus and recipes. For instance, pancakes and crepes, this is a nightmare across menus. Different kinds of berries, orange sections versus orange segments. Often people don't know the difference. Lemon rind and lemon zest. Okay, they come from the same fruit, but they are used to different purposes. Currants, raisins, sultanas. If you're making Christmas pudding, you will need all three. Marinade versus marinade, depending on whether you're using it as a verb or a noun. Cook, which in some languages only means to boil, but of course in English can refer to any thermal process. Melting versus dissolving, cutting into strips, which many use as cutting into stripes instead. You know, quite a minefield here. And that's only single words, mind you. If you go to collocations, then it becomes even more tricky. For instance, dairy produce. If you're from the UK or Ireland or Canada or the US or Australia or New Zealand, you're probably used to having your cream as half and half or whipping or heavy or double cream. And then you've also got some other special types as creme fraiche or clotted cream. But in some other countries, you don't have those names, but you may instead refer to the fat content. Let's say, take 18 or take 36. And then you've got to know how to align those creams, dairy creams, across cultures. And then lower down, there are a few collocations that typically are different collocations when they are translated properly into the target language. So you can't take honeydew translated, melon translated, and arrive with honeydew melon. Or if you take French and translate it, and beans and you translate it, you don't typically end up with what French beans are. For instance, dark chocolate is often bitter chocolate in some languages. Plain yogurt is often called natural yogurt, and so on. And of course, if you've got a corpus, you can quickly find those collocations. Occasionally, even spacing may matter. For instance, the contrast between cornflower and cornflower. These are basically two different plants, and the products derived from two different plants. Occasionally, you might wonder why some things are called or written the way they are. For instance, cornstarch and potato starch are usually interchangeable in the kitchen, but one is written with a space, the other is not. Gingerbread mix in many countries is called gingerbread powder. 5-spice powder is often called 5-flavor seasoning. Curry, if you use the word alone, will typically only refer to the final dish and not the spice. And a few other ingredients and utensils here that may pose problems in translation. Measures, what we saw in Pulp Fiction, these can be problematic. For instance, temperatures, you need to know how to convert not just Celsius into Fahrenheit and back, but if you're in the UK, you need to know the conventions for the gas mark. And occasionally with historic recipes, you may find more problems. For instance, you may find a recipe that says, take 1 can of flour. You heard that right, 1 can of flour. Now, flour was never sold in cans, but what happened in the US in the 50s and 60s and 70s was that the coffee can that was being sold was the perfect measurement for the flour to make 1 cake. So most recipes would refer to that. Now you go to a supermarket in the US, let's say Trader Joe's, and you find 12 different sizes of coffee cans. So you need to know which one was the original one. And then, of course, different ingredients come in packages of different sizes. For instance, a stick of butter in the US is not the same as a stick of butter in Poland. Even across the Atlantic, within countries that seemingly speak the same language, you have discrepancies in the measures. A pint in the UK is in the pint in the US. A cook's cup in the UK doesn't hold the same amount as in the US or as in Australia or Canada. And the same with teaspoons and tablespoons. So when you're translating a recipe from English, you need to know which country the recipe comes from. And then there are, of course, those discrepancies that are sometimes proverbial, where this one word means something different in the UK and in the US. That doesn't make the task easier for the translator. Sometimes recipes use foreign terms, and these typically do not get translated, so they are used as they are in English. You won't say burgundy style beef or caramel cream because that would be something different or not recognizable. So in order to translate and edit the cookbook, that's the end result. It was bilingual, so you had the recipe in Polish and in English, and then a photo of the final dish. I used the corpus of recipes that was self-compiled. And how did that help? Well, it helped, for instance, resolve some dilemmas as to the choice of constructions that seemed to be both legitimate. Thanks, Jean. Yeah, so for instance, you can say argula, you can say rocket, you can say garnish, you can say decorate. So I could use my corpus to determine that, for instance, argula was used much more often, garnish was used much more often. So if I chose that as my model, I went for those words. Then rice paper comes in sheets or wrappers. Wonton, which can be used in a similar mode and can look similarly, is only found in, or almost only found in, wrappers. This is not something that a dictionary will tell you, but a corpus will. Peppercorns or black pepper comes as black peppercorns. Juniper comes as juniper berries, even if they are very similar. Some collocations can be reused over and over. So for instance, if you find avocado in a recipe, it will often come as peeled, pitted, and diced. So you can reuse that over and over. You can put a potato into the oven and you can bake it. If you do that with a pepper, you roast it. If you put sesame seeds in a pan, you toast them. If you put cashews in a pan, you roast them. If you take a whisk and use egg whites, you beat them. If you take cream, you whip it. Again, not something in a dictionary. Prepositions or dilemmas with prepositions can be sorted out that way, and also grammatical choices. So typically you will find a lot of ellipses in cookbooks, and these concern both articles and prepositions and objects. So an example of a sentence that covers all three is the one below but, so the last but one line. Cover and refrigerate the fish. Article missing, noun missing, at least 4 hours, preposition missing, for at least 4 hours overnight. Turning the fish, occasionally, article missing. Very typical of cookbooks and recipes. Some other patterns that came out to be pretty useful in the translations, and that tend to pack a lot more information than the source text, where you would use a lot more words. Information structure. So for instance, English language recipes typically put the utensil in which you prepare the dish first, whereas in the Polish language recipes, you will start with the main ingredient. So this goes beyond syntax to information structure. You can use Corpora to look at impersonal constructions, and then a lot of other things. All right, so a task, one more task or two more tasks for you. What are the English names of the two plants that are displayed here? I expect that most of you have been living in Korea for a while now, so this should be easy. We have Bogbunja Ju on the left, we have Omija Cha on the right. What are the English names for Bogbunja and Omija? Red currant, no, it's not red currant. Raspberry, close, but not quite. Usually a slightly better term would be Korean blackberry. And Omija is typically translated as magnolia fruit, even though it's not nothing to do with magnolia. How about these two? We're in winter, and that's the right time for those. Bondegi on the left and hotteok that I cooked not long ago on the right-hand side. What are the English words for bondegi and for hotteok? There is, yep, there is. Bondegi is silkworm, pupae, and of course they can be boiled or steamed. And hotteok, that's a little trickier because you can't say Korean pancake because kimchi jang is also a Korean pancake. But one way to go around, especially with plants, is to use the Wikipedia as a parallel corpus. So we go to Omija if we know the word in one language, and then we go down to the left-hand side where you've got the different language options, and we go to the relevant site on the Wikipedia, and it will typically give you the name in Latin. So for instance, Schisandra, but it will also give you the name in the target languages. So you can go both ways in that. And finally, one more thing that you need to know how to go about is when you're translating names for dishes and how to go about them. There are a few strategies, but usually the best one is to preserve the original name and to provide a short explanation. So to finish off, I'll just play a short video, probably everyone's a bit hungry, of Polish food as it was remade in the US.
So here I am in Los Angeles, and you know, it's not every day that you can find one place to get all of your needs fulfilled. It takes a real special place like here at the Key Center, because you never know. I mean, you're looking for a donut maybe while you're getting some water filled up, or you're at the market, or hitting the laundromat, or getting your hair done, or maybe you're at the Western Union, or getting a video, or hitting some alterations and cleaning. And after a day of shopping like that, well, you're hungry, and of course you're going to have some, Polish food. Let's check out Polka.
Ladies and gentlemen, And your gourmet meal.
Delicious. It's like coming to my favorite cousin's house.
Pierogi already.
It is traditional Polish food.
I'm going to mispronounce it. Korolewski stuffed cabbage.
It's so unusual.
Unless you grew up in Poland,
Fresh deal.
like Catherine Dabrowski.
I always help my grandmother and my mother cook.
Now she's cooking in her own place,
Voila.
where she and her husband Andrew
All right.
are cranking out the classics.
The famous Polish pierogi.
Like pierogi, served 3 ways.
Cheese and potato pierogi. Some filled with sauerkraut and some with meat.
We are making pierogi dough.
All-purpose flour?
Yes, 1 egg. So add some water.
Crank it up. Way to kind of drop the clutch into 4. So how long do we mix this up?
For about 5 to 7 minutes.
So we just take 6.
Okay, 6
If
minutes.
we need to do the extra minute, we'll give it to you for free.
Wonderful. So this is done.
Doesn't she look like Snow White? And we're here in the Snow White kitchen, and I'm the 8th dwarf. I'm pierogi.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Already wants me out of here. Okay,
And the dough is going to rest for a minute.
she's having a timeout. You stay right there. Now we're gonna make the filling,
We make potato and cheese.
but I can try all 3.
Yes, we will start with potatoes.
Okay.
Cream cheese.
Is it a Polish
We
thing?
use a lot of white cheese. Cream cheese I like the most here in America. This is Vegeta.
The huhe?
Vegeta.
It's a dry vegetable seasoning.
Yes.
Dig it.
We use in Poland a lot black pepper.
Does Polish food have any spice?
You mean like Mexican, they have chipotle and all that?
Yeah.
No,
But you have vodka.
we do have vodka.
That makes up for it.
Yeah. This is curry powder.
Wait. You use curry powder.
I do. I
In
like
Polish
curry
food.
powder.
I do too.
Now we will mix the form from that little small balls.
Roll it in the balls, form the dough. Now we're gonna cut the dough.
The dough, right?
Okay. 2 of those go around 1.
Just one.
That's gonna stretch out around that?
Yes. And now you have to stretch it a little like a pizza. Oh, here you go. That's the way.
1, 2, 3. Nice!
Oh, take one in the middle, kind of, and now flip it in the middle, and then the sides. It looks perfect. I show you a trick. Take some flour, dust a little, take a little more flour.
All right.
Okay, and twist it this way, and voila.
And then we go over there and we boil them?
Then we saute them, and then we will eat them.
Saute some onions in a little bit of oil.
Yes, spices.
This is your own blend?
Yes.
A little seasoned salt with a kick.
We have 2 potato and cheese, 1 sauerkraut and mushrooms, and 1 meat.
All of that's for me?
Yes.
All right. Salt in the water?
Yes.
Big, gigantic Polish ravioli. How long does this take?
Approximately 5 minutes. Garlic, lots of garlic.
And this is how they do it in Poland.
Maybe not so much garlic, but yes, I use a lot of garlic because I love garlic.
For you?
Because of food.
How long do they sit in there?
For 1 minute.
Mouse water. This all fit on here?
Yes.
Wow. That's better than any pierogi I've ever tried. What's this little gem gonna be? Oh, winner. Sauerkraut mushrooms. Oh, really good.
Delicious.
This is the one I'm looking for. 3 meat. Can I have all 3 of them put together for 1? And can we call it the triple D delight?
Okay.
Oh, heavenly.
Pierogi and goulash.
Oh, I know what you're having.
Goulash.
Ooh,
It's delicious.
We are making goulash.
it looks like flank steak.
Yes. And now I'm going to cut this, make small diamonds.
Small diamonds.
Yeah. Now we will marinate this meat.
Okay.
Veggie oil, onion, paprika,
Yeah.
chicken paste,
Okay.
bay leaves,
Got it.
black
Wild
pepper,
with the pepper.
curry powder, some vegeta, has to be garlic, tomato sauce,
Very Vanna Whitish. With the hand and the swirl.
it's margarine.
Really? Is that big in Polish?
Yes, we use a lot.
So this is gonna marinate for how long?
24 hours. We are going to bake this.
Goulash bakes?
Yeah, for 1 hour and
Okay.
45 minutes.
350 degrees?
Actually, it's 500.
500 degrees?
Yeah, 500 degrees.
Oh, I can't wait to see what's in here. Give me goulash.
Now we have to put the starch into the mixture.
Love it. Wow, look at that.
Stir it. We
None
will
of it burned. Then what do we serve it with?
potato dumplings.
And in they go. A little salt water?
Yes,
That's the same mixture that we do for the pierogi.
the same mixture.
Pull them, you pop them, and goulash, and you gotta eat it.
That's right.
I knew it.
Okay.
How many are you giving me?
Well, you like to eat, right?
Nice and tender. A really creamy, tender gnocchi. Wow. The flank steak's one of my favorite cuts of meat, but I've never had it cooked down like that. It falls apart like brisket. Oh, man, that's delicious.
Fabulous. Really excellent. Never had anything like it.
I will definitely come back for that. And speaking of coming back, when you come back, you're going to see a dessert that's on fire.
All right, so if you want to see the dessert, then anyone who can stay behind, I can play it just a little later. That will require 3 more minutes, but just in case there is a time for like any question or comment, I think that we should make a little room for that. And then if anyone is interested in a write-up of the language of menus and recipes, then the reference is up there, and it's also downloadable from my academia and ResearchGate profiles. So thank you very much for your attention, Gamzamnida, and I'll be very happy to take comments, questions if there's time.
Maybe a quiet crowd.
Yeah, I also understand that everyone may be quite exhausted after a long day.
Yep. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you so much, Michael. We appreciated the presentation and what you've shown us there for Corpus, and yeah, much appreciated.
Right. Thank you, Jean, for hosting. And in case anyone's interested in the dessert, I can play it for the last 3 minutes if people want to stay in the room. Since that is also something nice to see, and that starts, I think, at 5 minutes.
Really excellent. Never had anything like it.
I will definitely come back for that. And speaking of coming back, when you come back, you're going to see a dessert that's on fire. Literally. Andrew, kielbasa at Polka in an LA strip mall.
Awesome little Polish restaurant.
Because it's ready too. Next.
Catherine Dabrowski
Great meals for great guests.
and her husband Andrew
And the royal platter for the king.
are turning out their childhood favorite.
Mixed pierogi.
Stuffed cabbage and also the goulash. Excellent as always.
And to top it off,
Madame, bon appetit.
Naleśniki, which is a rolled crepe. Oh, wonderful.
Now we are making batter for the naleśniki. Flour. Add some milk.
some vodka.
You wish. Mineral water.
Imagine if you added all that vodka.
1 egg and 1 yolk.
You're not joking, really. One more time. Woo! There we go.
Perfect. Baking powder and baking soda.
And then that mineral water. Oh, this thing is going to be nice and airy.
Yes, pure vanilla, sugar.
A lot of sugar.
It's supposed to be very sweet. All right, so now it will take a couple minutes.
We're done?
We done.
Now we get a hot griddle and flip them?
Now we will make the stuffing for the naleśniki.
And what's going to go in that?
Cream cheese and more sugar.
This is the diet plate.
Definitely. And cherries.
So it's crepe time?
Crepes time.
Nice and thin, move it around, just like doing a French crepe. All the way up the sides. Non-stick pan really helps.
In a moment they're ready.
She's daring it, ran there with her fingers, hot pan. And you always do it by hand?
Myself, yes. Everything hand. Here you go, voila.
It smells awesome. Get that vanilla coming through there.
This is the mixture.
Right, a healthy portion there.
Yes. And now I'm going to roll it. Okay.
How many of these come with an order?
4. Now we'll put some whipped cream on it, chocolate, and now add our secret ingredients
Okay.
to flame them.
Oh, we gotta turn the lights out for this. Oh, look at that. That was crazy. The vodka just lights like that?
Yeah, it's 96%.
Whoa!
There you go.
I dig that.
Okay.
The cherries make it. That's a first, me on a double bite of a dessert. It's creamy, it's tangy. It's got a little crunch of the exterior of the crepe. Hunter, you would love this, dude. That's awesome.
Love it.
Nice ending to a wonderful meal.
Here, I'll probably be licking my plate.
Kiełbaska deliciosa, monsieur.
Everything's really been fabulous. We talked about what restaurant we wanted to go to, and we thought, Polka, perfect.
It's really a special place.
Oh, you're so proud. I really enjoyed it. The food was really good. And you're a sweetheart, and you're definitely a hero.
So thanks again, and stay safe and healthy. My apologies for the technical glitch at the beginning of the workshop. And in case anyone's interested, there are 2 more of my talks coming up next weekend. Thank you once again.